All right, so good afternoon. I am Dr. Yu Sun from Our Lady of the Lake University, and I have with me today Dr. Mark Green, and I have other faculty. I just saw Dr. Gergen join us. Welcome to the Department of Leadership Studies, our Leadership Excellence Group, the webinar series. Today's topic is, are leaders born or made? What genetic research tells us about leadership? Thank you for taking time from your schedule to join us today, and we appreciate your interest by joining us on during this lunch hour. So we'll be recording today's session. If you registered, you will receive a copy automatically. If you want to share or forward to your friends once you receive it, you can feel free to do that. Okay, so make sure that we have a nice, clear recording environment. So I ask you to please mute yourself. Okay, as I just briefly introduced myself, I'm Dr. Yu Sun. I'm the professor of leadership study at Leadership Studies at Our Lady of the Lake University, and also serve as the director of the Leadership Study program at our Houston campus. And a little bit about me. My doctoral education background is in management science and applied mathematics. And I've been with the OLU for 11 years, more than 10 years. And my major interests are leadership assessment, management, decision-making, and then business analytics. And also I want to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Mark Green, who's also the department chair and professor with our department. He is in the San Antonio campus, which is our main campus. His background is in PhD, MS, MBA. He has a lot of degrees and still like a very passionate about continued learning. He has 13 years services as military officer, 30 plus years in higher education, and he published over 100 articles, graduated over 100 doctoral students. His focus would be leadership theory, ethics, strategies, emotional intelligence, conflict management. I'm going to hand mic to Dr. Green to add a little bit more about himself.
Good to see everybody virtually. So yes, I've been at the university for 30 years at Our Lady Lake, and I was there when we started our graduate programs in leadership 25 years ago. I am blessed to be able to teach the first year sequence of leadership courses to the doctoral students, and then when everything can work out really well, I get to do the same thing with the master's students. So I think at this stage of my career, that's what I'm the best at, is convincing people that aren't sure they can do graduate work that yes, you can, and helping them get through those first 2 semesters and build a lot of confidence. Genetics is not my field, but there's been a little bit of research since 2012. There was a big giant effort to do genetics and leadership, and it kind of has fallen away, and I didn't pay attention. So then I've gone back and caught up with what we know so far about genetics and leadership. So I'll synthesize that for you all today.
Okay, so Dr. Green, can you move the slide?
Oh, so sorry.
That's okay. All right, so we're here. I'm just going to ask you, take a minute to let us know more about you, let the room know about you, share a little bit about yourself in the chat box, like your name, where you come from, and your current role and your organization. Okay, well, while you do that, I will continue the kind of like introduction about the organization who provide this service to you. We are, as I said, Our Lady of the Lake University. Both me and Dr. Green are from this organization. I'm from the Houston campus, and Dr. Green is from San Antonio. So first, we've been around for about 128 years. The Sister of Congregation of Divine Providence broke ground in 1895 and established a private Catholic school, initially only for women. Now today, we are a co-educational sex credit institution with 3 campuses. They are in San Antonio, Rio Grande Valley, and here where I am in Houston. And we also offers 15 master program and 4 PhD programs. And a little bit of more, background about our department. Our Department of Leadership Study has been around for almost 3 decades now. It began in 1998 in San Antonio and has graduated over 300 doctoral students. The Houston campus opened in 2010, and we have over 100 doctoral alumni in the Houston area. And I see we have some alumni that actually join us today, Adriana and Luis, right? So today, the department is part of the College of Business and Leadership. It is ACBSP accredited and is the only leadership study department in the H-Town that offers leadership PhD program. You will often see that some other program that offers PhD with concentration in leadership, but we actually have the discipline, particularly for leadership study, embedded into the department. Okay, so we're a face-to-face cohort model that has small faculty to student ratio, so students can easily collaborate with instructors and classmates. And we meet all day, every other Saturday at our easy location for all 3 campuses. So it's a great program for working professionals all over the area. And just a few highlights of the program that we offer here in our department. We have a 2-year trimester program for master in organizational leadership. It's a HyFlex model, which people can take it from anywhere, basically. And we also have a 4-year trimester PhD in leadership program. And this is a face-to-face that everyone, every other Saturday that people can join us. And we have some great dual degree options that a combination of MS in organizational and MBA and PhD, and with option of combined MS in our leadership or PhD or MBA as well. In addition to all this great flexible degree program, we also offer professional development training to organizations. And if you have any questions about those, feel free to reach out to me or any of our faculties here. And next, this actually slide shows you some of our many affiliates that some of the area organization where our graduates work and lead, or our current students actually work. And you can see that our students have a career in a variety of fields. Not sure if you were come from, we'll check the chat box, but maybe you can identify your organizational logo. And then here's more about our valued affiliates, right? So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer of those later when we have Q&A. But for now, I'm going to turn back to Dr. Green for today's topic.
Okay, I look forward to distilling for you here for about 20 minutes what I was able to compile from the scholarly literature. So, born or made, we know that's a false argument. It's a combination of both. But what the research clearly tells us is genetics does influence how many of us react with our environment. We're genetically predestined with some dimensions of personality and intelligence that in turn affects our happiness, our comfort with people around us, and so forth. So there's a genetic link between how we were born and then to some degree how we interact with the world around us. But we want to narrow that down to leadership. And so yes, there is also a genetic link, ever-evolving field of study for influencing how people lead and whether they get chosen to lead. And then for hundreds of years, we've been studying how the environment in which someone finds himself might influence how they lead, whether they get chosen to lead, how effective they are, and so forth. So very quickly, slide 1, you can start to see arrows going everywhere. And the more you try to unpack this, the more it just feels like a Jackson Pollock, where everything is sort of connected to everything, but you need to break that apart so that it can be easier, more easily understood. In getting here, what I'm going to show you today, I went through this moment quite a few times, just trying to not only unpack, but reconnect dots for you all. So first thing I had to do was, leaders. What do you mean by that? And there's three big areas that are researched a lot. So one is, who gets chosen to become a leader, who gets interviewed, selected, and so forth. So it goes by many titles, but it's leader emergence or becoming a leader. The second one that's studied a great deal is the style with which a leader leads. And the third area I have included for us today is measures of how effective is the leader. So those would be our three different aspects of leadership that I'll narrow this down to. And now when you start talking about genetics, the vast amount of research is done that's got some genetic base to it, is our personalities and how that affects leadership, our gender, in this case, our chromosomal gender, and our general intelligence. And I was able to find one relatively recent large genome analysis on genes and leadership that I'll share with you. And then there is one study that has done its best to combine all of the research on all of this and try to answer what matters the most for these three aspects of leadership. So we'll wrap up with that. So here's our three different areas of leadership. Whether you become a leader or you emerge as a leader, how you lead, and how effective you are. And so it's tempting to go straight to how does genetics influence that? But there's some genetics influence some things, they influence some other things that are worth talking about. So genetics influences our personality, our gender, and our intelligence, and all three of those in turn influence how we lead, whether we get to lead, and how effectively people think we lead. So genetics, two broad ways that the research in our field of leadership get reported. So one, by far the most frequently used is twin studies, studies of twins. And then the other is what's been emerging in the last decade is looking for areas of our genome that maybe are related to leadership. My best guess is well over 95% of the genetic estimates related to things that are related to leadership come from these studies of twins. And only about 5% at most is currently coming from genome studies. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First, God bless the twins out there. There's things around the world called the Twins Registry. So twins sign up when they're like 3 years old, and they agree to be studied their entire life. So they follow twins to see what happens to them as life goes on. And that database is big, huge, often pretty easy to have access to study. That's used much more because the genome is a relatively new thing compared to the Twins Registry. And while the prices keep coming down, it's been when people studied genome early on, it was for things that were a bit more societally concerning, like various diseases and so forth. So it's just now getting cheap enough that people are starting to use it to try to study leadership. So majority of the research on genetic bases is from twins, and just a quick review of how that works. So we have two different kinds of twins. Twins that in simple speak, we say they're identical twins. They're monozygotic, or they basically have the same DNA. There's little subtle tiny differences, but they generally come from the same DNA. Then there's the other kind of twins. They're born at the same time from the same womb. However, they have different DNA. They're sister and sister, brother and sister, brother and brother. So we have twins that grow up in these twins registries, And a second piece of it that's important is that they grew up together. So theoretically, this is accounting for a lot of things like, did one child get great schooling and the other child didn't? Did one child have a caring parent and the other? Theoretically, they kind of, well, they had their own interests. They sort of had the same influences on them from about, age, from birth to say age 18. So then what happens is the twin studies say, all right, now what happened to them with adulthood? And if you start to find that as adults, the identical twins choose similar things, suffer from similar diseases, become leaders, don't become leaders, at a different rate than the twins who grew up together, born at the same time, but they are not identical twins, then the researchers are able to estimate how much of that difference is based on the gene. So that's the way most of our studies have been done so far in the field of leadership. This is the emerging world that once I get past the cell, it is going very fast trying to understand it. But all of us have cells, we have chromosomes, we have genes, and now you get into there and people start looking for loci or phenotypes inside the genes that might be related instead of to hair color, but to how we lead or how effectively we lead. So let's unpack personality just for a second. So it is related to all three of these areas that we worry about in leadership. And from a genetic point of view, the estimates are that about 40% of our personality is genetic. People who have watched children in a family will utter something like, they were just different when they were born. So there's a piece of that. The other is all the influences on us as we go through life that do indeed affect our personality. But it's genetic in that genetics influences personality, which influences these three aspects of leadership. So when it comes to personality, there's different ways to describe personality and measure it. For whatever reason, in the field of leadership, we have tended to default to what's affectionately called the Big Five model of personality. If you're a purist, those can be reduced down to two dimensions and called type A and type B. If you like going the other direction, you can explode five of these to the 16 Myers-Briggs types. The five is what's used a great deal in the research of leaders and leadership. Just a quick review, some of them make sense. So extroversion makes sense to most of us. You get excited by people, you get your energy from crowds and groups, versus you kind of like the world of ideas and being alone. Openness is not good nor bad. It's this openness to new ideas. And some of the subdimensions, as you can see, are things like fantasy, ideas. So high on that, you like free thinking, brainstorming. Low on that, still fine, but you kind of prefer standard operating procedures, checklists, procedures, processes, and so forth. Agreeableness at first sounds like it's somebody that agrees with everybody. That's a misfortunate term. It's really about, are you trustable? Are you seen as a person I can talk to, I can share with, and so forth? Lower on agreeableness often is not something that people strive to be, but that's a continuum. And then I always have to stop on this one. So consciousness, people want to instantly conflate that as conscious of the planet around me and global warming and saving endangered species. It's got nothing to do with that. So if you look at the root of the word conscience, feelings of right and wrong, things that ought to be done, that's what they're trying to connote with this dimension of personality. So you'll see things like order, dutifulness, discipline, deliberation. So it's a personal characteristic of your personality. And then neuroticism, root of the word is neuro, as in nerves and nervousness in this case. So this is the one that if you're high on it, you tend to be a bit more anxious, hostile, impulsive. This is the first one that if you're lower on it, people generally kind of like that aspect of people's personality. So all 5 of these now get looked at for these 3 different aspects of leadership. What I'm getting ready to show you for results are not the results of a study. They are the summarized results of somewhere between dozens and several hundred studies boiled down to one webinar at lunchtime set of talking points. So this is not that somebody did a study. This is that lots and lots and lots of studies have been done. And here's what the studies tell us. So when it comes to being selected as a leader, the one in red is because it's easier to graph it this way for a webinar. That's a negative relationship. So the more neurotic someone's personality is, the less likely they are to be chosen as a leader. The other 4 are the more agreeable people are, the more open to new ideas, the more extroverted, and the more conscientious, the more likely they are to be chosen. And those numbers are the strengths of those relationships. So they're all the more, they're all positive relationships. But the strongest one having to do with getting selected as a leader is conscientiousness. How we lead, the model that's been studied the most, that has the most research, is called transformational leadership, transactional leadership. Been around for 30 years and just thousands of studies. So what that shows us is extroversion is the strongest relationship to someone being considered to be transformational by their followers. Coming in second place, if you will, is that not being neurotic. So being emotionally stable rather than anxious, hostile, nervous, and so forth. And the others just sort of come along as, yes, they are important. And now, how effective do people think someone is as a leader? The openness to new ideas, and that makes sense because leadership is about change. And the extroversion is showing up again. And neuroticism, still, the more neurotic, the less effective people think we are. So if we put all 3 of those together, what I would call out to you to just notice is if you focus on extroversion across those 3 different areas, it's always an important relationship that the more extroverted someone is, the more transformational, the more effective, and the more likely they are to be picked. And then the other 2 dimensions, openness and conscientiousness, it's both important, but it's going to depend mostly on what aspect of leadership we're talking about. So genetics influences about 40% of personality, which in turn influences these other 3, with extroversion being quite important. And now when we talk about not gender identity, that research is still ongoing, it's getting bigger all the time, but the traditional chromosomal genders, how most of these studies have been done. So emerging as a leader, and how does sex, biology, or gender in this case fit into that? So the first news that probably is not a surprise to the room, but it's based on lots and lots and lots of research. Biological females are about 8% less likely to get chosen or emerge as leaders. Biological males, about 8% more likely. Beyond the scope of the webinar on why we have those prejudices in society, but it's what the research is telling us as of 2024. So that's a given, right? That generally overall from research, males a bit more likely to be selected as a leader, females a bit less likely to be selected. So then there's some additional drill down studies, not single studies, but composites of lots of studies that try to put some explanation on that. So estimates are, these are not proportions, these are relationships, that about 30% of the work experiences we choose to have a genetic base. And that just makes sense. People that are genetically more destined or oriented towards maybe people kinds of things, they're agreeable, they might choose work experiences that are in nursing or human resources. People that are oriented more towards technical or mathematical may choose sort of different work experiences. About 34% is the estimate of just genetics influencing the experiences you had when you grew up in your family. And then a huge relationship that the overall estimate is that about that the relationship between genetics and being chosen as a leader is about 0.69. It's a strong relationship. So how that fits together is the genetics is affecting personality, and personality can be sometimes seen in whether you are task-oriented or sort of relationship-oriented. So leadership researchers wanted to put special words on that. So instead of just calling it task-oriented relationship, they call it agentic and communal. So it turns out that in general, males score higher, biological genomic male, chromosomic males, they score higher on task, decisiveness, assertiveness, and so forth. And females score higher on communal traits of benevolence and relationships and participation. Then the bias or the rub is going to come in that males score higher on agentic, females score higher on communal. And then when you analyze what happens with being chosen as a leader, the more agentic traits, decisiveness, assertiveness, competence oriented, the more likely you are to be chosen as a leader. The more communals, the less likely. So that's bias built into all kinds of systems. But what we see there is starting to see the path. Males tend to be more agentic people in general tend to be chosen as leaders, and females tend to be more communal, and communal people in general less likely to be selected. Threw in one other one for you here. As early as childhood, I thought this one was fascinating. So this is studies of studies, like lots of research. So who gets picked to be a child and the leader? Who becomes a leader on the playground? Who's a kindergarten teacher choose to be the hall monitor? So only 0.03 of that is chromosomal. That was great news. But there is a belief that getting picked as a leader as early as childhood has a genetic basis to it. And then things we kind of see in adulthood, they already show up at getting chosen as a leader when you're a child. And that's are the people that you hang out with leaders? And are you in generally a pro-social kind of person? All four of those influence children getting selected as leaders early in life. Now, when it comes to how effective is the leader and their leadership style, this is the conundrum. So statistically, study-wise, females less likely to be picked as leaders, males more likely, possibly related to task versus communal. But when you then say, but how about how they lead? So in the general things we measure for leadership, the worst ones are what's called management by exception, waiting for things to happen and then acting, or blaming others, or avoiding getting involved with things. So those three leadership styles, males almost always in all the studies score higher on. But now the leadership styles that we know are very good to have, a little bit of focus on getting things done, people orientation, and then how transformational somebody is, making the follower feel like you care about them, you're trying to make them a better person, and rewarding them appropriately when they do what we would like them to do as an organization. All of those good aspects of leadership that are measured regularly, females almost always score higher. And now just the idea of intelligence. So personality influences it, gender influences it. Intelligence gets busy and complex really fast. So somewhere we can all relate to, there was an SAT score somewhere in your life and you had verbal and quant. So there's different levels or domains of intelligence. Each one of those has subdomains to be tested. At the top of the hierarchy is what the researchers call general intelligence, or G. So most of the studies on intelligence and leadership are measuring the general intelligence aspect, not the domain specific aspects. So when it comes to general intelligence, a little bit of difference now starting to happen. For years, the twin study estimates have been that 45 to 55% of our general intelligence is genetic. The genome studies happening so far, their estimates are lower, that maybe only 20 to 35% of our general intelligence has a genetic base. But either way, intelligence has a genetic base. This would be an example of some of the reason. Everywhere you'll see a little spike, and this is the edge of my knowledge, but I know how to read research articles. So everywhere you see a little up spike, that is a genomic region that is associated with intelligence scores. So starting to be looked at not just from twin stuff, but from the genome itself. When it comes to intelligence, and then how you lead, there weren't any I could find worthwhile for you all on intelligence and being selected as a leader, but how you lead and whether you're considered effective. So the red ones are the more the less. So the more higher the level of general intelligence, the less you tend to be the kind of person that waits for things to go wrong and then either tries to fix them or blame others. And then all the ones that are in blue that we sort of like, rewarding people, emphasis on getting things done, and people, and being transformational and being effective, the more intelligent the person is, the more they tend to be rated high on those sorts of things. So we've got personality has a genetic base, gender from a chromosomal perspective has a genetic base, and intelligence has somewhere between 30 and 50% of a genetic base. They all influence these three aspects of leadership. Now, just the newest research I could find that would be worth sharing, forget the middle persons, right, or the middle variables, just straight up genetic basis on its own with leadership. Did not find any to tell you about, which is genetics and leadership style. But there's a huge study that was done a couple of years ago in the United Kingdom. And they looked at, it's not the leadership gene, my friends, but they were looking for places on the genetic structure that are related to being chosen as a leader or becoming a leader, and things that are related to being an effective leader. So just a bit about that study, about 450,000 people in the study. And there were 42,000 that were in leadership positions and 205 people who were not in leadership positions. And you see then the male and female numbers, and they measured two things. The first one was were the people that they studied the genome on in a leadership position. That's a little dangerous because you could have been last year, now you weren't. But they used the United Kingdom's job classifications to determine yes or no, are they in a leadership role? And then they relied on self-report for how well do the people think they do in these sort of leadership related things of scheduling work, conflicts, directing, developing, coaching, performing, just sort of leadership behaviors that people might do. They might be doing those if they're not in a leadership position or they are in a leadership position. So when they did that genomic analysis, there was one phenotype that was statistically much more present in people who were in leadership positions. And then when it came to how well these people thought they were doing on managing the kinds of things leaders get paid to do, there were 8 phenotypes that were correlated, if you will. The higher the more the presence of those phenotypes, the better people said they did on these managerial tasks. So this is the first one I could really find that I could say is the beginning of maybe the quest for much more understanding about genomics and leadership, but I must share then a big giant however. So that same genome, that same phenotype that was present in people who are chosen to be leaders or in leadership positions, not in leadership positions. It also explains a lot about how tall you are, the degree to which you might suffer from bipolar disorder, how long you live. So that same gene, that same phenotype is present and higher in all of these things that they studied. It just so happens that one of them, and at a much smaller level, does it seem to influence whether you are in a leadership position. That's not to be confused with, it did matter. It is a finding. It's just keep it in perspective. We're not going to run out tomorrow and say we have found the leadership gene. So personality, chromosomes, gender, intelligence, and they all seem to relate to aspects of leadership. Study done about 7 years ago took all of the research on personality and those, all of the research on gender and those, all of the leadership on intelligence and those. And this is kind of a tricky one to explain. So all of the research results now put into the same analysis to ask the question in research language, which is the strongest predictor? In normal person language, which ones matter most? So here's my metaphor for us. World-class marathoners. So every one of them is a world-class marathoner. Every one of them has won marathon races. So all of them are gifted. But the question could be, which of those marathoners will actually win that marathon, which comes in second place, which comes in third place? Does not mean the third place finisher is not a great marathoner. It's just saying we want to have a different question answered here. So how effective is a leader? All of the research on leader effectiveness, where we had the gender of the leader, it mattered by itself. Intelligence matters by itself. Personality matters by itself. But you put it in the same race as behaviors that leaders engage in, they were much stronger predictors of leadership effectiveness in that head-to-head race. So for my purist friends, they were the stronger predictors. Another way to say it is, okay, they're more important. That's sort of true. And even simpler way to say it is, oh, they were the winners. So pick one of those three. So the most important thing on being an effective leader was don't be laissez-faire, reward your people, do be transformational, and be considerate of their feelings and their relationships. Those were more important than personality, gender, or intelligence. Now we get to how well the team or the group the leader leads performs. And it's a bit of a repetitive here now. It's all the research on gender, intelligence, personality, and leader behaviors, and how well the team performs. The answer again is keeping things organized through structure, being transformational. Conscientiousness is the first time that a personality trait crept in as being somewhat important up there with the two leadership dimensions. And this is for how well the team performs. How satisfied is the follower as a result of who the leader is or what the leader does. So we're seeing that same pattern, friends. Gender mattered a little bit. The personality mattered a little bit. But the big predictors of whether your followers are satisfied with their job, don't be waiting until things go wrong and then blame them. That's MBE passive. But be considerate, transformational, and reward them for a job well done. Those are the strongest predictors. And then finally, we get how satisfied are they with you as a leader. And so all of the research on that from all of these different variables, we're seeing one last time that personality matters, gender matters, intelligence matters, but they don't matter as much, or they're not as strong of predictors as rewarding people, not being laissez-faire, being transformational, and being considerate. So that takeaway is, yes, absolutely, just like every marathon runner by herself has the ability to win that race, deserves to be talked about. Gender matters, intelligence matters, and personality matters from a genetically influenced aspect to then turn around and influence leader emergence, style, and effectiveness. Leadership styles, however, such as being considerate, being transformational, having some reward for people who do things, they are also related to leader emergence, leadership style, and leadership effectiveness. And they are, drum roll, more important, or they are stronger predictors of leader effectiveness, satisfaction with the leader, the follower's satisfaction with the job they're doing underneath the leader, and how well the team or the group performs. They are more important than the quasi-genetically influenced factors of personality, gender, and intelligence. So that one just deserves to be amplified. The leadership styles that everyone in this webinar can practice, can get better at, and become a more transformational, considerate kind of leader. Those are more important at this point in all of research than your personality, your gender, or your intelligence, which do have a genetic base that is beyond your control. Not all of it, but some of that is just sort of genetically built in. These other things are learned behaviors that we can all learn to do. So, Dr. Soon, I will turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Graham. All right, so at this moment, feel free to put in the chat box about any comment, or questions, suggestions, concerns, anything that in your mind, or maybe a main takeaway that you have gained through this webinar. So in the chat box, feel free to text. And meantime, I'm going to just announce a few future events and then what's going on with that within our department. So for the future, we will please look for our upcoming webinars theories for the fall 2024, which is our semester. We're planning on that. Just keep an eye on those. And for the panel during the summer, I believe we do have one next month. The topic is nonprofit leadership. We may twist a little bit and depending on our panelists, their interest about the topic. And also we have the webinar theory, which will happen in 2 days as a follow-up for today's. We're going to have a virtual evening leadership latte. We used to have, if you attend to our session quite often, then we often have a virtual coffee hour. But we thought, maybe it's too late if we have an event at 6 o'clock. So we just call it evening leadership latte. I'll provide more information while we go through the presentation. And for any organization or corps that if you're interested about any specific topic, you can feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss any of the possible topic that we can provide for your organization. And what's going on for the graduate school department that we are actually currently a meeting for the fall 2024. So if you're interested about any of the our master or PhD program, feel free to reach out to us and we'll provide more details information about how to apply for the program. And then in 2 days, again, May 23rd, we have the virtual leadership program info session, which you will see the faculties and then the staff will all hop in and then to discuss some leadership topics and also provide insight about our program. Okay, next one. Okay, so this is the QR code. If you could take a moment to scan this QR code, that would help you direct you to the session to register for our evening leadership latte, which faculties and staff will gathering. And if you're interested about our program or any specific leadership topic or questions you want to discuss with our faculties, this will be good place to just grab a drink or coffee or whatever that you enjoy. So join us on this event. You will gain additional information. Okay, and then for more information about webinars and panels for the summer and fall, please scan this QR code, which will direct you to the main page about our event listed for the summer and fall. Okay, and yeah, take a moment. And then this is the details about the leadership evening latte that is 6 o'clock in the evening, and it's virtual. Just scan it and then it will direct you to the link with access. Okay, at the end, just provide a little bit about overview about our PhD in leadership journey that people, I see some questions about it. So it's a 4-year program. If you started this year, then you will end it at 2028. And then it's a trimester, so fall, spring, and summer. And some of the topic and the theory that Dr. Green mentioned today, you can maybe find it from 9310 leadership theories and even some assessment that offered in your first year. And then also we provide courses in organizational leadership, research method, and strategic. And then, so each semester you will have the first few semesters, you will get your core courses. And then towards to your year 3 and 4, you start to get your dissertation chair to work on the dissertation. So that's year 3 and 4 look like. And then, faculties are very engaged, and then we can hold hand for each one of our students to make sure that your dissertation from topic selection to proposal to data collection methodology, every step that you'll have a designated faculty member to help you as your chair to give you advice and guidance. And then we have some very good event that like a convocation to memorize those to celebrate your achievement. And we also have a fall spring luncheons to also celebrate achievement of the milestones. Okay, yeah, so those is just what we discussed at the beginning. If you missed the beginning, and then this what we discussed about our program and our department, that we offer program in leadership studies. And we have 3 campuses in Houston, San Antonio, and RGV, which is the only leadership study department that actually offers a PhD degree in leadership study. And it's a face-to-face cohort model with a small faculty to student ratio to encourage collaboration. I believe we have a cap above 12, so you won't experience a big classroom with crowd. So it's very like personalized, and you get a lot of attention from the faculty and your cohort member. Okay, it's a meet every other Saturday to support working professionals. And then we do have 2-year trimester program for master, which is half-flex options. And we have a 4-year trimester for PhD program. And then we have dual degree with the option of MBA and then PhD with MBA and our master program. Additional, we provide some additional professional development training. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, or actually Dr. Gergen's online that she's in charge of those development training. Okay. All right. Let's see. Do we have any questions? Okay. So Dr. Green, there are some questions. Question from Miranda. What have you found to work best when it comes to leader development, given that it can be learned? Formal instruction, coaching, experience, self-reflection, feedback, being mentored, etc.
I am not sharing so I can see it. Okay, yes, leadership. Okay, so now we tend to be a tad empirical or quantitative. So one of the things that's really important is when people start our program, there are what's called valid and reliable ways to measure leadership. So we have the research community, there are assessments for how transformational you are, how much of a servant leader you are, how humble you are, what your personality is. So we have our students that first semester with love, in both the master's and the doctorate, take a battery of their baseline coming in. The second part of that is we call it a 360-degree assessment, where anonymously, but we have our folks, they get 2 workers to rate them on those assessments, 2 colleagues and their leader, because you get 2 different answers, how I see myself and how others see me. And then based on that, they start to focus on areas that they need to grow in. And from there, it is a lot of stopping to think about what just happened and what I was low on and what I was high on, to start developing yourself. You can, my humble opinion, you can read people's books, how I led this place. And that's really good if you're ever in charge of that place at that moment in time also. But there's some general themes that come out of what we know about the research on leadership that we try to help our folks not only understand about it, but understand about themselves as well.
Great. And then Dr. Green, another question that Miranda is asking, what do this stands for, MBA?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Sometimes the long names won't fit on the graph so well. So in the most it's the most popular, it's the most widely researched model of leadership. So it goes from really terrible leadership to really great leadership. It's got 9 different dimensions. Over on the terrible side, so they just happen to call it management by exception, which basically means I'm ignoring things until I have to deal with it, right? When there are exceptions. And then, so that's the MBE part in that theory. And then how you deal with it. Oh my God, this just happened. We didn't plan on this. It's a disaster. Oh my God. How you deal with it. Active can be, I'm going to really try to fix this late into the cycle or the game. Passive is even worse. I'm going to look for a fault person. I'm going to blame colleagues or subordinates around me. How could you make this happen? So those are two really bad aspects of leadership. Management by exception, and then how you deal with it actively when it happens, or passively, you don't try to own it. And even worse than that, they happen to call it laissez-faire, which they'll call, trying to avoid making any decisions for which you can be held accountable all of the time. So those are the bad aspects, whereas over towards transformational, being a motivator, being considerate, being a role model, and trying to help your followers think a little bit creatively, that's transformational leadership, and it's almost always shown to be really related to being an effective leader, having satisfied workers, and so forth. So I often, friends, after all my life in this area, think that they could have come up with better names for lots of these things, but we sort of go with what the instrument and the theory calls it, and they called it management by exception. Wait till things go wrong and then deal with it.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question from Luis. I wonder about the binary classification, leader, non-leader. Where do they make the border between the two? Some people
Yes.
lead a group of 4 or 5, others lead a whole corporation or government agency.
So on the genomic research, they used the job classification reporting that they do in the United Kingdom. So they have, we have something similar in the United States, right? The Bureau of Labor Statistics will tell you how many people were retail managers in the year 2022. They keep track of those things. So they use those codes to say, these are quote unquote leadership positions, these are not. So they didn't ask the person, they used what was their, the equivalent of our Bureau of Labor Statistics codes. As I sort of alluded, the problem with that is people who 2 years ago were in a leadership role needed to slow down to take care of an aged parent and maybe went back to staff. They would have been a leader 2 years ago in that system of counting them. They wouldn't be today. Your converse is, well, asking people what you've just kind of alluded to, Luis, are you in a leadership position? And now you're relying on how they classify it. So this study that I gave you just happened to use the equivalent of the Bureau of Labor Statistics classification for the job people were doing at the time they did the study of the genome.
Okay. Okay, and then we do have a question asked about if the program is offered face-to-face in San Antonio. I say yes, we for PhD program, it's face-to-face for all 3 campuses. And for master program, you have options to go on campus or virtual joining. So that's that apply for all 3 campuses.
I'm going to give you my 1 minute. Why that turns out to be really important for the docs is you all get admitted together, and you're together for about 10 semesters. Last couple, it's you doing your dissertation completion. And I get to see them because I see them at brand new orientation. And I'm getting ready to say farewell to my group about July 5th that I've had for 3 semesters. And what happens with grown adults is they start to bond, they start to support each other, they get their own teams and Facebook pages, and they share. It's a little different than when you think face to face. I'm still a student right now. I sign up for a class every semester, but who's going to be in that class? It all just depends on who else registers. They know their friends will be back again next semester. So that face-to-face is really an important part of that cohort system that we've created. I think the other part there is they chose, the students we have, they choose to come 2 reasons, well, us, but yes, it's Saturdays. That works for a lot of people, that they don't have to try to go to work all day and then go to school from 6 to 10 at night. And then secondly, they want the face-to-face, not the two-dimensional learning with colleagues and the professors. So that just happens to be what our program is. Doesn't mean the Gonzaga online doctorate isn't for somebody else. So yes, face-to-face, all three places, and it fits in well with this cohort going through together for 10 semesters.
Thank you. And one last question that from Adriana. Just a quick comment and question for Dr. Grant. Terrific presentation. I really enjoyed seeing it all tied together. One question: who are the UK author of the
Yes,
genomic study you
I
cite?
promised Dr. Sun that I would give you the references to send out. I will do that. Like a lot of those researches, there's about 8 of them on the paper, but yes, I will get that. It is deep, by the way. I hit the highlight. They did all kinds of interesting analyses. So yes, I'll get the references for everything to which I was alluding today for Dr. Sun to send out.
Okay, great, thank you. And I have one more from Roland Garcia. That Dr. Grant, were you surprised about the relationship between leadership style, the big 5 personality traits, over gender as a predictor of leadership?
Yes, I was. Yes, because to some degree, we are self-conscious of saying, well, what we try to do and teach and practice, those are sort of learned behaviors. And we're conditioned from watching, crime scene CSI, right? It's all about the evidence. It's all about the fingerprints and the DNA. And so when you see a study where it's got the DNA influence things and the behaviors, that the behaviors came out consistently in that study. The funny name of the article, Roland, was "One Last Time, Which Matters, Traits or Behaviors?" Meaning genetic influence things or things you can learn. And that was the whole point of that journal article. But before I read it, before I knew they did it, I wouldn't have had a predilection that those mattered more. I really wouldn't have, because I tend to see them isolated. Over here, I know this, over here, I know this. Putting it all together was an amazing piece of research that DeRue et al. Did.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Grant. Thank you, everyone. Before we go, I just want to bring a quick reminder to check your email for the complimentary tools and then PowerPoint and also the recording, as well as the information Dr. Grant was mentioned about the articles. And and thank you for joining our presentation today. And we hope that you have some insight from the leadership. And it was a pleasure to bring this webinar to you all. And make sure to follow us. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Dr. Sun, thank you.